This is
Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to Life Well Lived by Omobola Stephen, an engaging and enlightening talk show on life, relationships, and the business of life. Grab a cup of juice and just chill. Life Well Lived by Omobola Stephen. Live life, live fully.
Good to have you on the show. This is Omobola Stephen, the host of Life Well Lived by Omobola Stephen, where we have mind shift conversations that are disruptive yet constructive in nature, pivoting the positive changes and transformation that you and I need in life. Now, we always emphasize and encourage you and I to embrace personal development and self-improvement along the course of our lives, because when we do so, we tend to find ourselves along the way. And in finding ourselves, we realize that there's so much that life has in store for us, willing to offer it onto us when we don't give up. And it's also very important for us to begin to look inwards and ask the right questions. I begin to search for all that we need to become in life, because all that we need to become in life and the change that we desire to have can only happen when we are truly ready to embrace the changes that comes along, and when we intentionally focus on developing ourselves. This is the mission and the focus of Life Well Lived by Omobola Stephen. We share this profound insight from professionals who are adept in the topics of personal development and self-improvement. Thank you, Jason Munson, for joining me on the show. Jason is a leading consultant at NeuroChangeSolutions, and we also call you the Stress Interventionist. Great to have you once again, and looking forward to our time.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you once again for joining me on the show. We will be talking about our neuroplasticity, the key to reshaping our brain for better stress management. So I'd like us to talk on your tailored approach to meditation practices.
All right, sounds great. Yeah, okay. So I think it's good to first review of like what a definition of meditation is. Because there's a lot of different ideas of what people think that meditation is. Some people, when they think of meditation, they think of some guys, white-haired guy sitting up on a top of a mountain with his legs crossed and his hands out saying, "Oh," something like that. But one definition of meditation is just to become familiar with, to focus on something. Another definition is just to plan or to think deeply. So when we look at definitions of meditation in that way, a lot of people are meditating that don't realize that they are meditating. To form a strategy to think about your future is a form of meditation. So when I work with people with meditation, what I'm wanting them to do, or what I'm doing it myself, is we're getting into a state of mind where we're not thinking about our familiar past and all the problems that go with that, with our past, and we're not thinking about a predictable future where we might be stressing or worrying about something that may or may not happen. But to meditate, we have to get into the present moment, just to be in the here and the now, right in this present moment. This is where we can create from. This is where we can actually do things. We can't do anything about yesterday. We can't. Tomorrow's going to happen when it happens. So getting into that present moment, and that can be a real challenge for us to do. And then thinking, one form of meditation is to think about what you would love to have happen. What is a potential that you would love to experience? So we could be really specific about that. I helped a couple out this past year to meditate about about the birth of their son. The mother was a really anxious person. She was a really high stress person. She always was worrying about the worst that would happen. And when you're in that state, when you're constantly in anxiety, or when you're constantly in high stress, there's several systems in the body that will shut down. And one of those is the reproductive system. All the body's energy is being used to prepare to meet a threat. And so there's no energy left inside the body for a long-term building project like a baby, so you find a lot of high stress women, have trouble getting pregnant. Well, my friend, or my wife's friend, she actually started having some problems, and she started bleeding during her pregnancy. And so we met with them and said, look, I want you to create a vision for your future. I want you to picture your son, it's going to be a son, your son's birthday. And I want you to picture it just going perfectly. Like, not what you think you could get, but what would be like the perfect birthday for your son? What would be your experience with it? How is his health? I want you to envision having that perfect day, having your son born in perfect health and starting his life out the best possible way that it actually could. And so after that, the complications with the bleeding stopped, and she ended up having her son about a month ago. Perfectly healthy, perfectly wonderful. Now, I know what some people are thinking. It's like, oh, come on, really? It's like, isn't that, just coincidence? How can, the mind have that much power? But science has shown, and it's proven, is that what we focus our attention on, we tend to affect, that we can manifest. So whether it's something going on with our bodies, something going on with our relationships, something going with our wealth, or with money, or with our job, it's when we focus on a positive vision for the future, we tend to find what we are focusing on. So that's kind of a long-winded response to your question, but get me going on meditation. I'll talk all day.
Great. Thanks for sharing that insight. So can we talk on stress, depression, and neuroplasticity? How are they interwoven, or are there any disparity?
Well, I can tell you, so stress, neuroplasticity, depression, um, you know, going. Let's start with depression. That was part of my journey of actually getting into this work. Is uh, I had a situation happen in my life with work, and I finally just one more thing happened. That's what usually it's like, is that we're kind of carrying our load around, and then just one more thing happens, and it's like it pushes us off a cliff. And it's like this cascade effect of all the bad things that are going on inside of our lives just kind of crash down on us. um and the trick is that we kind of have this instinct, or this natural reaction, where we think that if we keep on thinking about the problems and what's wrong, that like somehow we'll figure it out. And we're scared to stop thinking about the problem, because if we stop thinking about the problem, then maybe it'll get worse. And that's a sign that you're in stress. So if you're constantly thinking about the problems, and if you're thinking about the worst case scenarios and how everything is going to go backwards and get worse, that is a sign that you're in stress. It's a part of the autonomic nervous system. It's the part of the brain that manages our stress response. It's built into us to do this, because essentially, anything better than the worst case scenario is survivable. So our bodies are built, our brains are built to think about the worst case scenario, and just to try to not have that happen so that we can survive. The problem is that we are living in a stress pandemic. We have more stress now than we've ever had before, coming from more places than it ever has come before. And so a lot of people are in this constant state of stress, where they're constantly thinking of worst case scenarios. Their body is constantly in this state of ready to run or fight. And the problem is that no organism can survive in long-term stress. So people do this for 10, 20, 30 years or more, and it leads to disease and disorder. They can literally, people literally make themselves sick by the things that they think about, that they worry about. So, and neuroplasticity is your brain's ability to rewire itself. It's your brain's ability to change. And people who are constantly in stress and feeling the negative emotions that go along with stress, whether that's depression, fear, worry, doubt, anger, they constantly feel those emotions and think those thoughts. They wire their brain, they hardwire their brain into the habit of thinking that way. So when something happens, you know, some outside stimulus happens from the outside environment, they have trained their brain to look for the worst case scenario, right? So when somebody knocks at the door, it's not your best friend just decided to pop over and say hello and you're excited for that. You know, it's the debt collector there to repossess your car. You know, it's like, and where we place our attention is where we place our energy. So the stress effect, it has a really negative impact on people's lives. However, the reverse is true, is that we can actually, through neuroplasticity, we can wire our brains to look for the best. We can wire our brains to look for greatness. We can wake up each morning and say, what would greatness do today? What would greatness look like today? How can I live my life in a great way? How can I show up for people today as my best self and look for the absolute best outcomes to happen? So we start asking questions like that. We start thinking like that. Well, now we're wiring a new program inside of our brain that is actually health promoting. Do that for 10, 20, 30 years or more and see how your life turns out.
Okay, so which habits do you think is best for a healthy brain, or which habits are best for a healthy brain?
Which habits are best?
Yes, for a healthy brain.
Habits that are best for a healthy brain. Um, so putting positive information inside of your brain. Laughing. I just had a meeting or met a guy who has a company called LaughMD, and they've done extensive research around how people heal faster when they laugh for 30 minutes a day, right? So, you know, intentionally, you know, seeking out something that's positive, that, you know, makes you laugh, has a, you know, you have all these neurotransmitters that get released when you laugh and when you smile. You have, you know, dopamine, which is that feeling, that neurotransmitter that gives you that feeling of of accomplishment. You know, like when you've done something great, you know, and the feeling that you get after you've done something that you're proud of. Oxytocin, that's the neurotransmitter that makes us feel love. When we connect with other people, we feel love. You have serotonin, um, you know, is what we get from a sense of community, you know, of being around other people. And then you have endorphins, which is the neurotransmitter that gets released when you exercise. So when you laugh and when you smile, you release all these feel-good chemicals inside of your body. And there's plenty of stuff out there to make us, you know, feel angry and depressed. You know, it's not hard to find any of that. So, you know, purposely you know, seeking out something that's funny, that's comedic, that causes you, you know, to laugh. It causes you to go into the present moment right now, right? You're not, you know, you're feeling that emotion, you know, right now in the moment. So that's a quick, easy, and powerful way. But the other thing is, which I think is the most important thing that I teach in my work, is for people to get clear on what an ideal vision of their future is. Not what they think they can get. What would they love to have happen? Like if there was no limitations, what would you have happen? What would your life be like? Write it out. A mentor of mine taught me that you should always have a 3-year vision for your future. And do the vision board, put up the pictures on the wall, put the date. Right now I have I think May 1st, 2028 up on my wall. And what do I see for my future? And then write it out as if it's already happened. It's May 1st, 2028. My business is making this amount of money. I wake up in the morning and I meet with a client and I have this experience, and they're telling me the fantastic results that they're having as a result of the work that we've done together. I have clients are meeting with clients later on that we're signing the contract, and it's $100,000 training that I'm doing for a company in healthcare, and I've been communicating with the CEO in the human resources department. I'm so excited to get to do this. My relationships are like this. My kids are like this. My health is like this. The fun things are getting to do are like this. Just like as if it's happening now, and if it's actually in the past tense. It, People who do this and people who get good at this, they find that the things that they are focusing on begin to be attracted into their life. They start looking for it. They may have always been there, just waiting in the wings, and they just never intentionally thought about them, never intentionally brought these good things to mind. And because they weren't looking for them, they didn't see them, right? When you're in stress and anxiety and you have fear and hopelessness and despair and depression, it's like you have blinders on and you can't see the good stuff. And people will even try to bring it to your attention and say, well, you should, be grateful for what you have. It's wonderful. You have this relationship, you have this good thing. And people be like, no, okay, whatever. It's not that great. That's nothing. I don't, I'm not where I want to be. Yeah, if you're always focusing on that, well, you're just going to get more of that. But focusing on that ideal vision of the future, pick a future that you would love to live, and then fall in love with that future and start looking for the breadcrumbs that lead you there. It's the most powerful thing I know that you can do with your brain.
Jason, having said that, focusing on what we truly desire, I think that's absolutely important and very correct. But I'd like you to also let the audience know that, the role of we individuals are putting our actions into play is also very important. Can you share that?
Yeah. Well, I think that, you know, doing something for 15 minutes a day in a small way is better than doing something for 2 hours on a Saturday, right? So um, a lot of small actions sometimes lead to big things. So a person doing research on a subject that, let's say it's personal development, and making the commitment to say, I'm going to read 10 pages a day, or I'm going to read for 10 minutes a day. I'm just going to sit and I'm going to put a timer on. I'm not going to look at the clock. And when 10 minutes go off, we got as far as we got. That's powerful. The same thing with exercise. A friend of mine, a mentor of mine, he needed to make some changes with his health, and he needed to start somewhere. He needed to just make some progress. So for the first week, he just put on his shoes, and that was it. He just put on his workout shoes, for the first week. And then for the second week, he put on his workout clothes and his workout shoes. That was progress, right? And then he said, okay, I'm just gonna go get in my car. That's my goal. I'm gonna go get in my car. Well, okay, I'm in my car. Well, as long as I'm here, might as well drive to the gym. I don't have to go inside if I don't want to. So And he gets to the gym. He's like, well, I'm here. I might as well go inside. You know, it's like he's just kind of baby stepping himself to, to make, those healthy choices, Um, it- and a lot of habits are, are just about that. It's about making small choices. I recently changed a habit that I had. Um, because I was I I used to read the news kind of first thing. Like I'd get my coffee and I'd read the news and just catch up on the news for like 10, 15 minutes, Wasn't spending a lot of time on it. And then I would pray and I would, do some Bible reading. And I came across a scripture that where Jesus said, he says, put the kingdom first, then all these other things will be added to you. And I'm like, okay, so how can I be better at putting the kingdom first? I'm like, well, what if I started out instead of reading the news every morning? What if I just switched it and I did my prayer and my Bible study first? You know, what if I did that? See what happens. So, just making a little shift, like that. So there's just kind of a handful of buckets that we have in life that we can affect things. So we have health, we have money, we have career, we have family, we have spirituality, and the sixth one that I like is fun. And intentionally saying, okay, what can I do? What's something that I can do every day to effectuate and change each of those six things? All of them are important. But what's one thing that I can do? What's one healthy habit that I can pick up? And then make a commitment to doing that. Plan it, schedule it, put it on the calendar, write down a reminder. I send myself emails to remind myself to do things, that are important to me. And making those little changes, having those little shifts in habit over time, um, just as a negative habit, piles up over time. People don't die the first time that they smoke. People don't die the first time that they have a sip of alcohol, but they do it for long enough and over a long enough, they do it for long enough over a long period of time, it can have a negative impact. Well, the reverse is true as well. The person that gets out and goes and walks for 10 minutes a day, the person who does, you know, let's say 10 minutes of meditation, per day. That's a great start, but this morning I meditated for an hour before I got on with you today. So it's that habit stacking, getting several good things going on throughout the course of your day has a dramatic impact.
Jason, let's go back to stress, right? So what role does emotional intelligence, what does it have to do with managing stress?
Sure. So stress happens one of two ways. The first is something happens in our exterior environment. So let's say you meet a wild animal in the woods, or you're on the Sahara Desert and you meet a lion. Um, you see that, and your brain and your body immediately go into stress because they perceive a threat. That thing might hurt you, might physically hurt you. But that can also happen with people. A person that's in a bad relationship, as soon as they see that person, or let's say that person's fine for most of the day and they only get violent when they start drinking. So the second that you see this person in your life take that first sip of the drink, you immediately go into stress because you're preparing for something that is predictable. But it can also happen with coworkers. You have a negative relationship, or somebody at work has a negative personality trait, and dealing with that person brings you into stress, puts your body into that stress state. And it's the same state that is if you were just facing a predator in your environment. Your body has this same physiological response. Um, So that's that's what happens, or that's how we experience stress. Yeah. So the tricky bit is how we can go into that state, but how long are we going to stay in that state, right? So, um, I can think of something that happened very negatively in my life with some person, and with 15 years ago. And if I think about that situation, I'll actually start to create chemicals inside of my body that cause me to feel the way that I felt when that event happened 15 years ago. My body is so objective, it doesn't know the difference between the actual experience happening or the experience that I'm fabricated just by thought alone. My body doesn't know that I'm not there 15 years ago. That would be the example of being emotionally unintelligent. Emotional intelligence is having a stressful event, um, and being able to shorten the period of time that you experience the negative emotional reaction. That's emotional intelligence. So, think about if you got the zebra and the Serengeti, it's in homeostasis, eating grass. The lion comes up and tries to attack it. The zebra goes immediately into stress and it runs away. And if the lion can't catch up with it, 15 minutes later, the zebra's back to eating grass. It's back to homeostasis. It's not thinking about it, later that night. It's not thinking about how the lion chased it and feeling the stress of the lion chasing it, nor is it worrying about tomorrow if the lion's going to chase it again. It's not putting itself into that stress of the future. That's something that only us human beings can do. We can think about the past and re-stress, or we can think about something in the future and pre-stress, and we can be in stress in the moment. This is how people stay in stress for 70% of their day. So this ability that we have to have something stressful happen inside of our lives, whether it's an event or something somebody has said or something that somebody has done. And if we keep on focusing on that event, then we are in stress and we are staying in stress. Emotional intelligence is saying, okay, this thing happened. This person said this thing. I'm going to choose to focus on something else. I'm going to choose to focus on something positive. I'm going to go put on that comedy. I'm going to go read that book. I'm going to go meditate on my ideal vision of the future. When we make that choice to think a different thought, those chemicals inside of our body that are associated with stress, they start to dissipate. And we no longer are feeling angry. We're no longer feeling fearful. We're not feeling these negative emotions because we can't focus on stress and feel the negative emotions that go along with it, and focus on something positive and feel the positive emotions. We can be in one place or the other, but we can't be in both places at the same time. It's actually not possible for that to happen. So if we can intentionally focus on the positive vision of the future, the things that we want to have happen, we get out of stress, we stop feeling the chemicals of stress, and the research has shown that only takes 90 seconds to 2 minutes to happen. So emotional intelligence is recognizing when you're in stress, focusing on something positive and feeling the positive emotions, and shortening that period of time that you're feeling the negative emotions. That's emotional intelligence.
Jason, we also encounter stress at work. Don't you think so? So, what are some of the misconceptions about stress that we often encounter at work?
Um, you know, I think one of the misconceptions is that you have to experience it, that you have to be stressed, that you're going to go to work and these things are going to happen with these certain people at these at these certain times or places, and that we don't have a control over our reaction. I think that's probably one of the biggest misconceptions. And I think it just comes because it's how we naturally react. When we go to work and, there's that person that does the things that cause us to feel the stress, and we don't that's our natural reaction. It's built into us. It's made to keep us safe and to make us so that we can survive. It's the default programming that we're all born with. And what most people don't realize is that they have a choice. They have a choice over their emotions. When somebody acts a certain way or somebody says a certain thing, we have a choice to react differently. And so what I like to say what I like to think is that if you can predict that something's going to happen that will cause you stress, or if you can predict a person is going to act in a certain way, that causes that your reaction, your normal reaction is to go into stress. But if you can predict it, if you're going to predict they're going to behave a certain way, can you prepare for it? And can you say, okay, I know that this person is going to act this way, and I'm going to choose to feel differently when they show up that way. When they show up that way, I'm going to choose that as a signal for me to focus on this positive thing instead of me getting on the roller coaster with them and taking the ride. So an example of this was years ago. We're going back 20 years ago. I noticed that my sister and her husband, whenever we would do something together, they would always pick the scenario that was best for them. So, like if we were going to go to the movies, they would pick the movie that they wanted to watch, and we would watch that movie. If we were going to ride together, they would always have me drive my car and not pay for the gas, right? So they were always looking for, whenever we would do something, they were always picking the scenario that served them the best. And so I started to notice this pattern. And every time it happened, it made me angry. And I started to actually look for it. I'm like, oh, here we go again. I bet they're going to do this. And sure enough, they would. And, and this is before I learned about any of this stuff. I didn't know about any of it. But I just had a moment of reason. I said, well, why are you doing this to yourself, Jason? If you can predict how they're going to behave, well, then getting angry is a choice for you. I was choosing to get angry. It was predictable. So I said, okay, I'm going to change this around. Since I can predict it, how about I just play along with it? So the next time we got together, we're going out, I say, hey, guys, where do you want to go and eat tonight? What are you hungry for? We're hungry for Mexican food. Great. Which place? Oh, that place. Okay. Can I drive? So when I flipped it around and just turned it into like, okay, what can I do to actually make these people feel happier? I had a better experience. I was no longer angry. I actually started to enjoy myself being around them, and it was totally predictable. So if there's somebody at your work that causes you stress, that causes you to feel negative emotion, look for the predictability. Predict how they're going to show up. When are they going to do it? What are they going to do? What are they going to say? If you can predict it, you're in control. You're in control of your emotions. You can choose how you're going to show up in that moment. That's how you defeat it. Well, then great. If for myself, I really try to start off my morning by really getting into a space of love and gratitude. and feeling those emotions throughout my day. So if I'm showing up into a situation where there's a possibility something is going to happen that is going to be stressful, and I've presenced myself in the feelings of love and gratitude, and that's what I'm feeling in my heart, and the stressful event doesn't happen, then I just coast right on through feeling love and gratitude. Um, no big deal. So in which case, I might say that by how I showed up, by being in love and gratitude, by being in love with my ideal vision of my future, is it possible that I changed how that person was going to behave because I showed up differently? I showed up in a different energy, and I showed up in a positive energy, and it defeated their negative energy, or the negative situation that was going to happen now didn't happen because now I'm focusing on those positive elevated emotions and ideal vision of the future. Fantastic. Victory. We won.
Thank you so much, Jason, for your insight indeed. But don't you think that we also need to be addressing leadership stress?
Absolutely. So, stress in the position of a leader, um, even if it's just simply you're the leader in your family, right? I mean, you could be a lead, leadership inside of a company, or you could be leadership inside of an organization. But the role is the same. Is that you have people that are depending on you for direction and for outcomes, and there's consequences if you fail. So I'm married and I have two teenagers. And probably the biggest exercises in leadership that I experience are with my family, more than with my company, more than with my clients. Are my family is the greatest exercise, or lessons and exercise of leadership, especially with two teenagers. I mean, they're crazy. So, uh, you know, uh, every great leader, you know, from whether you're talking about Gandhi, Joan of Arc, Steve Jobs, every great leader, they all have this one thing in common, is they all know to have a vision that is independent of their environment. They all have this thing that they're focusing on, that they're going for. They have an outcome that they're aiming for, and they're directing the organization toward producing that outcome. And they're good at not letting anything get in the way of that. So the thing that happens though is when things go wonky and sideways and things aren't working out the way that they want it to, or they start operating differently. They start changing some of the habits that they were doing, or the things that they were doing that were making things work. And then you start having these breakdowns, and people start losing trust in the leader, start questioning, the effectiveness, of the leader. I mean, I've been in situations, in both ways. I've been in situations where I was succeeding very, very goodly as a leader, and things were going the right way. And then I've had other situations where things went sideways, and maybe I didn't have the skills, or the vision necessary to produce the outcome. And, I was fired. It's, you need to find a new leader. I think that an important thing about leadership, um, is one definition of leadership that that I like, which is that a leader is someone who shows up and things turn out differently because he showed up or she showed up. Things were going to go just a certain way, and because this person showed up, it changed the course of events, either for positive or negative. So I think that good leaders are ones that uplift and inspire people with a vision, and get and enroll people into that vision and get them to join them on the journey in such a way that people will take action for themselves. They know what the outcome is, and they will put their all into producing that. They don't even have to be asked to. The leader doesn't have to tell them to. When leaders enroll people into their vision, people will show up for the cause, for the mission. That's great leadership. And when that happens, you have low stress inside of the organization, because people feel fulfillment. On the other hand, when you have a bad leader that shows up, he's changing the course of events in a negative way, then stress increases inside of the organization. And when people are in high stress, there's low engagement, there's poor communication, the teamwork gets fragmented, the customer has a poor experience, there's weak, unclear communication, people are less performance, there's low productivity inside of the organization. And if it's a business, it costs the company a lot of money when you have leadership that's like that. But the reverse is true also. When people are out of stress and they're into a creative state, they have higher performance, they're more productive, goes straight to the bottom line, company makes more money. And with people that work with me, we typically see results like that. We'll start to see some real positive improvement within 30 days.
Can we talk on the current breakthroughs and emerging trends in neuroplasticity? Do you think there are?
Well, the brain is the most complicated thing inside of the universe. When I was 5 years old, I had an accident and had brain trauma. And, at that time in the 80s, science had got to the point where they thought that the brain was fixed. That, basically you have what you have. And if you have a brain injury, you're going to be living with that, forever. But what they found, neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to rewire itself. So people can have, traumatic brain injuries, and the brain will work around the damaged part of the brain. It'll start firing and wiring new neurological connections to be able to compensate, for the injury. And this continues to happen throughout our lives. By what we've talked about here, by the things that people focus on, they're wiring their brains, one way or another. And if you keep on thinking the same thought, that is going to cause that the neural pathway that's associated with that thought. Every time you think that thought, that it makes it easier for that those neural connections to fire together, and they fire faster, right? So it's like, making a trail through the woods. The more times that, a person or an animal walks across that trail, well, the more pronounced, the more dug in the trail becomes. And it's the same thing with our brains. With neuroplasticity, the more that we go down a pathway, or more that we have a thought, the easier it is for our brains to be able to do that. It becomes second nature to us. We do something so many times that our body knows how to do it better than our brain knows how to do it. It's like we just do it automatically. So for some a person, they could wire themselves to say, whenever I get stressed out or angry or frustrated, or I get tired, or I have a bad day, I want to have a drink. You do that enough times, you're not, for long enough, you don't even think about it. A person just feels stressed and they're pouring themselves the drink. They're not even thinking about that they have conditioned themselves, to do that. if I get my wife really angry, if I do something, bad enough, she's going to do one of two things. She will start cleaning the house, or she'll go run. She'll do one of those two things. That's her reaction to me doing something dumb, right? Well, cleaning the house isn't all that bad, and going on a run is good for you, right? Some other people, will do something different. They'll get into a stressful situation and they'll decide that they're going to eat a lot of food, that's going to, that they're going to go binge on a bunch of junk food, eat a bunch of candy, right? That's neuroplasticity at work. It's what we've trained ourselves to do by our habits and our conditioning. But the positive thing is I have a family member who's been sober for 7 years. And he got sober while he was in jail. He was in jail for 9 months, and he decided he was going to get sober. So he spent 9 months rewiring his brain, picking up new habits and new conditioning. Now 7 years later, he has used neuroplasticity to change his brain, to change the neural pathways inside of his brain to where he does, he doesn't want to drink. He doesn't want to do that anymore. So we could talk about that all day. It's a fascinating science, and they're still learning more about it. There's the end of the road is not even close when it comes to understanding the brain and neuroplasticity.
Absolutely. Thank you once again, Jason. Do you have any important news, perhaps a project you think is going to add value to the audience? You can share if you have any.
So I just finished my book a couple months ago called Rewire for Calm: How to Break the Cycle of Stress and Thrive. So this gets more into detail of what happens when our bodies go into stress and what we can do about it. There's some fantastic exercises that are in there, but if you're listening to this now and you have a team of people that you're working with, the teamwork is fragmented. You're not getting the results that you want from your people. You're having to ask, multiple times for the same things. Your communication's unclear. You're not getting the productivity that you want. You can book a meeting with me by going to meetwithjason.net. That can get you on my calendar. So meetwithjason.net. If you want to have some upgrade in your team's performance, I'd love to speak with you.
All right, good to know. Thanks for sharing that projects with the audience, Jason. We really had a great time listening to your expertise on today's show. I appreciate your time once again. We talked about neuroplasticity, the key to reshaping our brain for better stress management. And now Jason Munson is a leading consultant at NeuroChange Solutions. And we also call him the Stress Interventionist. We really had a great time as we explore this important topic. Such a dynamic time that we are in. I wish you best of luck once again in all the projects that you embark upon, Jason.
Thank you.
If you'd like to catch up with any missed episodes of the show, you can do so on any cross-promotion platforms or any podcast distribution platforms online. And to have a great time as you listen to thought leaders, professionals who are adept in the topics of personal development and self-improvement, share profound insight on constructive mind shift insight and conversations that is going to pivot the positive changes that you need. Indeed. Till I come your way, I need you to always stay safe. I talk to you soon. Thank you once again, Jason. Thank you for sharing your time and also this valuable contribution to the topic of discussion.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you subscribe and leave us a review.